Welcome. This is the podcast series dedicated to living a revenue culture. For those of you who've been around with us for a while, you know a revenue culture is when you maximize profits because you first optimize people, and you did that in a low friction context that makes it easy for optimizing people. Um, we publish one of these podcasts every 2 weeks, and we look for people out in the real world who are working on applying these principles of living a revenue culture. And we want to bring them to you so you can learn from them and from their successes and sometimes from the things that didn't work quite as well. So today we have a longtime friend of mine, uh, Rion Westfall, and I hope you do. If you go look his LinkedIn up, you will find he's done some very, very interesting things. Um, I'm pretty sure he and I were talking off camera that he's probably the only person I've ever had on who's been a rocket engineer. He's worked in government. He's worked in mining. He's owned his own gold mine. He's been an international consultant and trainer. He's owned a company and worked in the oil world. And so his combination of skill and practice is going to be pretty unique. So I think we're going to have a lot of fun with this today. Right now, he has a new company. And as you take a look at his new company, he's going to talk to, and he's writing a book, and he's going to talk to you about owning your revenue. And I love the approach. And he will probably tell you that he's going to ask his clients some very tough questions, but beyond asking the questions, he's actually going to expect answers. Uh, and that's going to be how he kicks off working with clients, that it really is them owning their revenue growth, and that it starts with that recognition that it's some work and they got to be willing to do it. So, Rion, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Rick. It's a pleasure to be on and I appreciate the intro.
Yeah, well, the first thing I'm going to ask you, and you've got to tell the story, of how you got to where you are today, because you have done some fascinating things, and every time we talk, I learn more about some of the things you accomplished, and so just get us to where we are today, and then we'll start to talk about where you're going.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, I know different than any kid growing up, just like I'm telling my senior right now. He's interested in the medical space, so we actually found a doctor and we sent him over to shadow with him. So he shadowed with a group of doctors for 2 days, and he actually got gloves on and went inside people and helped people that doing things. He actually got some real life experience. So no different for me. I looked at my skill sets and I said, well, what is it that I want to do? And I ended up honing in on mechanical engineering. And naturally, that engineering just kind of took me into cool development space, which sent me to Raytheon Missile Systems to design some cool stuff there. But I was shortly then recruited for some mining hard rock operations, giving some of my father was a contractor, and we contracted out to rock and gravel, sand pits, things
Yeah.
like that. Use that heavy equipment. And so they saw that on my resume and said, "Hey, we want you." And so I joined that group, EPCM, engineering, procurement, construction management. I speak Spanish, so they were, "Hey, we've got projects in Mexico. Can you go do this?" And so everything just kind of folded in. I'm also a business study by major, uh, by my study, by trade. And so, I got different opportunities to be able to develop the business development for those same projects, right? Not just work on them, but actually find the projects and negotiate the relationships and the terms and all of those types of
Yeah.
things. From there, when you talk about the international aspect of it, I continued developing my skills on the business development side and was recruited by an international firm that they trained mining operators how to operate and maintain these very sophisticated plants. And you and I both know that those plants don't exist, largely here in the US. Those have all been shipped out, overseas. And so it's allowed me to work in about 15 different countries. But in that process, and seeing all the different types of cultures, regardless
Yeah.
of the language or the color, and there's so many things that as I was going through all of these experiences on the business development side, I would be flown in first. So I'd come into an operation that's might be a $2 billion operation, might be a $500 million operation. The sizes were varied, and my first aspect of work was doing an audit on the facility. So how do you start with an audit on a facility that has hundreds, thousands of people that are constantly
Yeah.
working around it in ants? So from that aspect, I started noticing patterns. So when you ask, how do we arrive here today? Well, as I notice those patterns, I'm taking mental note. I'm taking physical notes. I'm obviously doing the work and we're doing a bunch of stuff for them, helping them with their processes and helping them with their procedures because you're dealing sometimes with people that have minimal education.
Yeah.
And so, but through those processes, through those things, I just kept seeing a lot of similarities, regardless of where I went, regardless of who I was with, regardless of what language was spoken,
Yeah.
whether they were male or female, it didn't matter. There were patterns that I kept seeing over and over and over and over. And as I continued my own personal development, I started a business, a consulting business to handle that aspect of the work. As you mentioned, I went into the mining myself, had our own gold mine, went joint venture into actually some private equity into the oil and gas space. So we had some new technology that we were bringing together just with some partners that I knew. So we had some private equity money that came in, so a lot of different business aspects, but every time I would do these, I would see these patterns repeating over and over and over again. And some of the patterns. Heck, you taught me some of the patterns, right? So as I've seen this, I realized that I think me, no different than everyone else, we went through a shift with COVID,
Yeah.
right? That there were different things and people started thinking differently. I'm the same way. I started thinking differently. And one thing that led me to where I am right now is SMBs, small and medium-sized businesses, because I love entrepreneurship. You already know this. I'm just serial entrepreneur. I love it. I believe that it's what keeps us and maintains us, and that capitalism is really just a key part to our society and who we are. But I've noticed that SMBs in particular, they've got two types of owners. One type is the fact that the person was really good at their trade or really good at developing their product. And because of that, they started a company and they moved into it. So while they're really good at that aspect, there's obviously so many other pieces that they're
Yeah.
not so good at because they haven't been exposed to it. The other type of owner is the guy who's got lots of money and he's invested into a service or a product of some sort. And while he's got the money and the financial business side of it, he doesn't understand the intricacies
Right.
inside of it. And if we're honest with ourselves, I mean, I've had you talk about these hard questions. It was here just probably about 45 days ago or so. I mean, I had a gentleman on. I started asking questions. He started crying on me. I mean, he's just like, he says, "This is a gut check for me." He says, "This is real stuff." Well, why are you doing this to me? I said, "Well, hey, we got to get this out. We've got to recognize, we've got to be able to define certain aspects of our company and
Yeah.
ourselves, personally, before we're ever going to align to anything that's going to be successful in the future." But anyway, so yes, long story short, I am taking those patterns and I'm creating I have created a system, a program, and I call it the Own Your Revenue process or the Own Your Revenue program. And writing a book about it. That book is going to encapsulate some of the first parts of it,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, that's kind of what's brought us to where I am here today.
Wow. One of the things I noticed when I looked at your LinkedIn profile, the uh, name, the own your own revenue on your LinkedIn profile, you have that in caps, and before the own, you have the GR, so it's grow your revenue. You have to own your revenue, and I thought, what a really clever way to communicate that in just a small number of letters and characters, but the recognition is really powerful that revenue is not shouldn't be accidental, and if it is accidental it's not repeatable or scalable, and so you really need to own it in order to repeat it or to scale it.
Absolutely. And the thing is, I mean, I define revenue as much more than a dollar. I mean, when we sit back as a business owner, there's so many different aspects, and we hear the word revenue, our mind naturally goes to, hey, what's the bottom line?
Yeah.
What's the revenue dollar at the bottom line? But revenue is so much more than that. Revenue is your time.
Yep.
Revenue is your stress. Revenue is your inventory. It's your process. It's your strategy. It's, there's so many aspects. Any aspect that affects the bottom line can be considered revenue,
Yep.
right? Because if you don't have inventory, are you going to be able to produce at the bottom line? The answer is no. If you don't have a strategy, if you don't have, and so on and so forth. So it's really important when we talk about own your revenue, it's really taking control of all parts of your company.
Yep.
Because when you don't do that, those, you can be good at nine things, but that there's going to be one thing of those 10 that's going to mess you up pretty bad.
Well, and I think when I hear you define that or talk about explain it, to me I apply the word value, because revenue is about the value that you both give and receive, and sometimes um, what you really want is you want to lower your risk, or you want to be prouder of what you delivered to the market, or you want to be more fulfilled in your career. And you could get money and figure out how to buy those things, or you could just manage your business in a way that those things are part of your bottom line. You feel fulfilled because you're doing important stuff and you're impacting people's lives. And so I love the way you're thinking about that.
One of the first things, and this is, this will be offered to anybody that's hearing and listening to this podcast as part of my book. I'm quote unquote interviewing, but it's a working interview. It's a three-part working interview where I spend 3 hours with you, right? And we go through different pieces. We take action on those pieces, and we look at the results. And we'll talk a little bit more here about that today. But one of the very first things, I mean, I love your title, Living a Revenue Culture. If we look at the word culture, we can very easily extrapolate character from
Yep.
that, because the culture is all about the character of the individual.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I can have my grandma who loves to play the piano, or you can have the, high octane UFC fighter that's just, I mean, the different characters are going to bring in a different culture to
Yep.
whatever organization or group that you have. So as an individual, that's where we have to start. And when I mentioned, uh, the one of the gentlemen that started crying on me, the very first thing I do in this three-part mini challenge is we talk about value, but I do not talk about any of the value of the company. We talk about the value of the individual. and what value they provide to, certain people and certain groups. I've got 5 very specific questions that I ask. And as we go through this, I mean, literally, this guy, he started crying on me. He's like, man, I didn't realize this was going to be personal. But the fact is, business is personal. And I mean, it's all relationships. So if you don't understand or have at least some clear tone of the value that you want and some of your own personal non-negotiables in life, it's going to be near impossible to develop a company
Yeah.
that will share those same values.
I love that, Ryan. The really since the pandemic, it's become really clear to us that before you do anything around a business plan or a business strategy or a revenue strategy, define your purpose. And we've defined purpose. We think of it as a continuum. On one end of the continuum is what we call mercenary. And regrettably, today, when people think of mercenary, I think the first place their brain goes is a Jeep with a machine gun and a bunch of, that's not what we mean at all. Uh, we think of mercenary as a hurricane just went through Florida and 10,000 homes don't have roofs. And, there's a bunch of companies that as soon as a hurricane or tornado or flood go through an area, these companies show up ready to restore power or heating or roofs or whatever. And they know how to work with your insurance company. Their trucks got, batteries and power generators on the back of the truck. They got the things they need, and they can come in and, contract with your insurance company and start your roof in 12 hours. And that's a mercenary kind of activity. It's really important and it's a really good one, but they probably never have the same crews, 2 disasters in a row. And they're never going to come back and do new business with the old clients. And it's an opportunity to solve an immediate problem, and you can make a lot of money doing that. Uh,
Yep.
the other end is, we call it a big purpose organization as opposed to mercenary. It's long term. It's based on partnering with your buying community, and it's based on your purpose. It's you're there to make their world better in some way, shape, or form. And what we've identified is the worst thing to do is be neither, because now your employees don't know, well, which am I? Am I a mercenary or am I? And your customers don't know which you are, and your bank doesn't know which you are. And, so, you know, our experience is pick one. Whichever one you pick, then you can build a go to market for the one that you picked. But purpose drives it.
No, absolutely. I mean, I love the phrase and I use it all the time. Clarity is power,
Yep.
right? I mean, Mr. Wonderful, Kevin O'Leary, he's got a phrase that says clarity is capital. And so I mean it's so true. I mean, having been through some of those exercises, again, private equity venture that I took in where we brought in millions was clarity is capital. I mean, once we got clear in the message and the things we were doing, then the capital side of it came so much easier than it did, before. So absolutely 100%. When I couldn't agree anymore. We have to be able to identify that. One of the things that I like to do with my clients, especially early on, is what I call the customer roadmap. And I know you've even
Yep.
touched on this, but to me, there's 6 different destinations that every every business will have their customers going through. And if you think of, we were talking about the road trip that I'm getting ready to
Yeah.
take with my family. I mean, very similarly, we've got that high level look where hey, I'm going to hit the interstate. I'm going to go from point A to point B and then from B to C. And I've got these major cities I'm going to hit. We've got to understand where it is we're going. So
Yep.
very, very similarly, every company, they have to understand, how does the client come into me? How do they end up making the decision to buy with me? How does the purchase order turn into fulfillment and
Yep.
it moves on and so and so. But and even at the end, how do they return? You talk about this. How do they return to me? How do they provide me with referrals? How do they provide me the testimonials that I need to continue to get more people on this exact same journey? And I know that exercise, and I've even offered some of that stuff, even as little free checklists and stuff. If you do look at my profile at my shop, you'll see some of that there. But it's absolutely critical to one of the first parts to establishing clarity of any company is pulling together those stops. And that's just from the 30,000 foot view, because you know as well as I do that once you get into a city, hey, it's nice to see that you rode the intersection in, but you're there in the Phoenix area. Well, do I take the 101? Do I take the 202? Do I take
Yep.
the 303? Do I loop around here? Where's the construction? Well, it's changing every day. Do I take this road? Do I want to stop and eat a hot dog here?
Yep.
Where do I want to go while I'm in the city?
Yep.
And so there's so many different ways that customers can get detoured, that they can get lost along that route. And so if it's not clear to us as business owners, as business leaders, then surely when the
Yeah.
customer starts on that journey, they can end up in Timbuktu, far away from you, and you'll just never get them back.
Well, and, I love the way you're defining this because the clarity and the intentionality are what allow you to scale. Because not only is it that your customers don't know which one of those options we're all going to take, but your own team doesn't know. And if you have partners in the market, either as delivery partners or they're part of your supply chain, if they don't understand where you're going and how you plan to get there, they can only be marginally helpful and you don't get much scale or much leverage from it.
So true, so true. I mean, I even tell all the clients I work with when we design that customer roadmap, because that's part of the process. The own your revenue process is make it visible. Like this isn't a secret document that we're keeping in the back. It's not like some of the financials with social security numbers or whatever it is on the background. This is your customer roadmap, and every customer that sees the map, every employee that sees the map, every business that you partner with that sees the map, it will become clear to everybody, and everybody's going to know, hey, when I go there, when I work with that company, this is what I can expect. And because I know what to expect, guess what? I'm going to visit there again. It's kind of like the menu, at a
Yeah.
restaurant. If you like a restaurant and you know what the menu is, and there's certain pieces you like, hey, there might be some that you don't care for too much, but hey, if you like it, you're going to come back for
Yep.
more and more and more. And
Yep.
it's no different when the customers, when your fellow, and when your internal employees, when your fellow business joint ventures or people you do business with on the business side, when everybody sees that, they're so much more willing to come visit you.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You're you're giving clarity to two things that are so people think they're different, but they're so connected. And one is that whole purpose piece. Because when I understand your purpose and then I understand your roadmap, that's where you become unique. Because it's that combination of what you believe is important and valuable and true combined with your roadmap. Because probably elements of the roadmap, well, I have to find a new account and, then I have to talk to them. And that's going to be kind of universal. But when you combine that with your purpose and the way you're trying to transfer value and the behaviors that you consider to be um, acceptable and unacceptable, that's where all of a sudden your uniqueness as an employer and as a uh, business partner shows up. And it's the combination that's so powerful.
It's an easy question to answer, but a difficult question to answer well. And you know what it is. What problem do you solve that nobody else does? I mean, it's easy to answer. It's easy to throw down five, seven, eight, 10 different bullet points, but to sink that down into potentially one sentence, what are you doing that nobody else does? Hey, that's once you hone in on that, a lot of these other things start to become clearer, and your ability to focus and produce your product, your service, whatever it is that you're doing, it is magnified tenfold.
Well, share with it. I mean, you and I can always have a great conversation that goes on and on and on. But share for us, what you're looking to accomplish with your new entity, and who's your ideal client, and what kinds of outcomes would your ideal client want from working with you?
Well, that's a great question. I knew you were probably going to head there, right? So, as talked about, SMBs are my target. I mean, I don't work with the large corporations that have thousands of employees and such, but SMBs that are established that at least have a business. I don't necessarily work with startups per se. I mean, even though the program will work. I like going into people that already, hey, they're already working, they're already doing, and something's happening, right? So they can have three people, they can have five people, they can have 50 or 100, or sometimes I get to that about 150, 200 employees
Yep,
where hey, you start kind of turning over into that corporate world, right? You
yep,
start, hey, well, that's responsibility of so and so, and this is responsibility of so and so. Why don't you visit with our office over there? Once you get to that point, it's kind of okay. Well, let
yeah,
that be somebody else. So ideally, I have found that this works extremely well with service providers and producers. So
good.
manufacturers of something of some kind, or they have a team and they provide a service to either B2C or B2B, to clients or to other businesses. Um, in regards of what to accomplish, well, or what issues, as mentioned before, you might be a business owner that started because you were really good at the service. You were really good at the producing the product. But maybe there's just some other things. Well, hey, me personally as a business owner, I'm not as good on the sales side, or I'm not as good on. I don't know HR compliance,
Yeah,
or I don't know that whatever it is, you're going to find it. If you're going to be a business owner, you're going to find limitations, and that is guaranteed. The issue is when SMBs sit back and say, "Well, hey, I found John, I found Jill, I've got this person, they're part of my team, and they've got some experience in it." But to all of a sudden pop up and say, "Hey, we as a company, we're as good as we're going to be," that's you and I both know there's so much more room for improvement
yeah,
because the owner themselves, their whoever they've chosen for their VP of ops, whoever it is that they've chosen for, everybody has limitations. You and me both, and we all have so many things to make better. So what the own your revenue process, what I've designed is, if you recall when we started, I talked to you about patterns.
yep,
I would notice patterns over and over and over again. So part of my program is to say the pattern that I see SMBs struggling with the most is they don't know how to approach the growth aspect of their own company. They're just not quite sure exactly, well, where do I start over here? Do I go over here? And it turns into a fireman activity
yep,
where you're almost going from pain point to pain point. Whatever hurts the most or whatever's the most uncomfortable, I'm going to go that route. I'm going to go this way.
yep,
It might be mixed in a little bit with some strategy, You might have a little bit of a mission statement, or
Yep.
you're going to see certain elements of a
Yep.
company that has little pieces, but it's going to be like Swiss cheese. They're going to have holes just kind of missing. The purpose of the own your revenue process or program is to fill all those holes,
Yep.
is to go through and identify and easily be able to categorize where those issues and opportunities fit.
Yep.
And at the same time, do it. You talk about living a revenue culture. Well, you and I both know that a solopreneur, that's great because you only have to argue with yourself.
Yep.
You don't have to get anybody else on board. But once you go to two people, three people, 10 people, 20 people, 50 people, you have a myriad of other thoughts, other intentions, other personal issues, as well as business issues,
Yep.
and so forth. So, how do we bring all of that collectively to work in harmony for the purpose of the growth? So, you
Yep.
talk about living a revenue culture. Well, you have to be able to easily define this for people. You've got to be able to pull it in. And I just kind of laugh because, again, I've been doing this for several decades, right?
Yep.
I've traveled around, I've brought all these patterns in, and it's very similar to a coach. I mean, that's why we call them coaches, right? I played sports. I know you played sports way back. I mean, when we play a sport and we get pretty good at it, we tend to think that we can't improve too much.
Right.
But when we bring in, and I'll never forget one of these days, I was being recruited there in college as a quarterback, and I was visiting Stanford, and one of the coaches comes in and he starts talking to me about things I was doing wrong that I had no clue. I mean, I'm being recruited by dozens of colleges across the country. And I'm sitting there, and on the field, as he's talking to me, guess who's on the field? Well, it was Jerry Rice. I was this close to being able to throw him a ball, but didn't get that. That was reserved for their Stanford quarterbacks. But he starts picking apart. After he told me all the reasons that they love me, he starts picking me apart. Says, well, you got this and you got this, and well, your feet this. When you do this, you turn your foot out a little bit, and that causes inconsistent. And I'm just like things I'd never even really thought of.
Yep.
Like I just had no clue about because I hadn't reached that level yet.
Yep.
I I haven't. And you and I both know that. I mean, heck, Tom Brady, one of the most winningest quarterbacks there is, even to his last year, he had three coaches. One to help him with his mentality, another to help him with his tech. I mean, he had several coaches sitting there consistently over and over and over, telling him how to tweak, how to get better, how to do this and how to do that. And that's the purpose of this whole program, is to say, hey, I'm certain I haven't yet found a company that I haven't been able to help, but I'm certain that there's going to be aspects where we can find improvement rapidly. And if we put certain parameters, certain processes in place, it's repeatable.
Yeah.
You and I both know, even though I'm not the chef or the cook, I know when my wife and she takes a certain combination of eggs and milk and flour and all that kind of stuff, it's going to get a certain result all the time,
Yep.
as long as she follows the recipe. So very, very similar. Instead of asking for the loaf of bread, we should be asking for the recipe. And that's what I'm bringing in. I'm bringing in the recipe and I'm bringing in the how-to, so that any SMB can virtually say, "Hey, let's take down the walls of pride. Let's take
Yep.
down the wall, the ego, and let's sit down and just be coached on how to be better. Here's a process. Here's a methodology. Here's a system. Holy cow!"
Very
Right?
cool. Very cool. So as you think about all this, and as you said, you've been doing this for more than a couple of years. what trends are you seeing today that people really need to pay attention to when it comes to owning their revenue?
Trends that I see people needing. Um, the first one we already talked about is clarity, right? There's a certain element of not having things defined,
Yep,
and when it's undefined, it's it makes it difficult for the owner to follow, but near impossible for your employees and your team to follow. So we all know inherently certain things like, hey, turnover is bad. Well, why does turnover exist?
yeah,
My findings are the fact that you're not clear with a lot of things, hence you get turnover.
yep,
People don't leave organizations that are very, very clear with what they're trying to do. They leave because they see the lack of clarity. They see other opportunities elsewhere. So that would be one of them. And probably another one going back to this that comes to mind is with technology, we are seeing so much, hey, I'm just going to put it into this bucket, and this bucket is going to somehow churn out a result. I'm going to put it into this AI thing over here, and it's going to churn out a result. I'm going to put it over. I started this with sticky notes and a whiteboard. And I can guarantee you that I will get more accomplished with sticky notes and a whiteboard than most AI things will.
yep,
And it's because again, because of the process.
yep,
I know if I do A and then B and then C and then D, and I do that in that sequence, I'm going to get a result. As of right now, I was just looking at some of the numbers that just pulling the people who have decided to take this mini challenge as part of my book writing.
yeah,
So, it's twofold. I mean, let's be honest, right? I'm writing a book, and everybody knows. By the way, I just got your book, so I'll throw that in there, right? But right here, Smart Rev on the back, you see one, two, you've got three at least on the back, and I know you've got lots more, but you've got testimonials,
yep,
right? That's people that you worked with. Well, what's the value of a book without a testimony?
yep,
I don't know. So I was looking at the numbers of the people that I'm working with, and mind you, these are SMBs, got anywhere from 3 years to 11 years in business. Some of them have three people, some of them have that's about 80 people. Some of them are doing smaller numbers. Hey, I'm only at about 1 million a year. Some of them, heck, he's doing 3 million a month, right? So these SMBs are all over. Some of them are in the food industry. I've got construction. I've got services. I've got landscaping. Heck, I've got financial in there. These all of these aspects. By the time we sit here and we start going through this systematic process, right now I'm sitting in spending 3 hours with each one of them. After I spend my 3 hours with them, we are averaging being able to identify 182% increase on their monthly revenue. So taking their numbers, running them through a 3 hour process, in essence, we have defined and we've become clear and we've been able to target a path for 182% monthly increase.
wow,
That's what we're sitting at right now. And so, and this is just the start of it, right?
uh-huh.
So you've got to identify it. You've got to find a way to bring it out. You've got to come through the process. I mean, you and I both know when we go to the doctor, we don't tell the doctor what to do.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully not. Hey, doc, you need to prescribe me this. Well, why? Because I know, what makes a good doctor,
Yeah,
right? The doctor is going to be able to look at you and be able to say, well, we noticed this, we noticed that, we
Yep.
noticed this. He's going to talk about your weight, he's going to talk about your blood pressure, he's going to talk about your cholesterol. He's going to take input about your existing system, and then he's going to find your best route to improvement of whatever it is that you're working on. And so, very, very, very similar. That's the way this process has been designed. It's been designed to work with, hey, let's take this evaluation, let's bring it together, and let's solve a way to consistently, month after
Yep.
month, quarter after quarter, half year after half year, that we can repeat these steps and we're going to get a result that is reliable for the growth of our future. And this is a process of owning or taking control of the revenue of your company.
Yeah, you're creating clarity and intentionality. So we're about to run out of time. So I have two last questions for you. One is, as you're talking about the people who are going to participate in uh, in your final book creation, are you still looking for more volunteers?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I'm filling that bucket and building relationships. So yes, absolutely.
So all your contact information's here on the podcast. So if somebody would like to go through that 3 hour experience with you and have a look at 180, I think 82% or whatever.
182% is our average right
So if they'd like to kind of figure out if that fits them,
now. Right.
they can reach out to you. So then the last thing I'd like to ask you is, what would you like to share with the SMBs in relation to, what you're doing and, how to match up what you're doing with the right people out there so that if they really want to own their own revenue, what would you say to them?
First step would be one, and I've done this. Sadly enough, I start in this process with some people, and walls go up, and it's like, well, I'm good at this. I don't have any problem. I don't have any issue. Well, hey, I I can care less.
Yeah.
Like this isn't me passing judgment. I'm working toward an end.
Yep.
So yes, I'm going to ask hard questions. So I guess the answer would be one, a willingness. Just like any sport, if going back to Tom Brady, how slow was Tom Brady? We've all seen the video where he runs his 40. He's as slow as a cold molasses, right? And it just being willing. So that would be the first criteria, is just being willing and wanting to actually own your revenue. The thing is, you have room to grow. You have places to be. You have a future you that is waiting on you. And real, you talked about in the beginning, maximizing people in a low friction environment. Um, I've removed myself from the day to day consulting where I'm in elbows deep doing the activities, and now I'm coaching the activities.
Yeah.
I can tell the SMB, hey, do this and do this and do this. And when you do, you're going to start realizing, you're going to start seeing growth, you're going to start seeing change. That change is you owning your revenue. And when you start taking control, when you start feeling like, man, I actually have some
Yeah.
control over this versus the firefighting season that I just went through because it was winter and everybody wanted my backup generator, whatever it is.
Yep.
I'm actually owning my revenue. I'm owning my future. I'm taking control of what I want this to become. And when that clarity starts to come in, again, as far as your question in what people should be prepared for, or maybe that wasn't the question, but that's how I interpreted it, right? Is what should they, be prepared to do and be prepared to expect is exactly that. Being able to just come in and say, hey, I want to go through the process. Stick me through this process so I can come out the end better than what I went into.
Yep.
And my guarantee is my promise is that it will. I mean, decades and decades and decades of seeing over and over and over these patterns to come through and say, this is the process that best helps fix this. Now, of course, every coaching client is a little bit unique here, and we got to do a little bit
Sure.
of tweak, a little bit of tweak there. But by far and large, those that are willing to just take a step back and say, yes, let's learn, let's grow, let's own my revenue, let's take control of it. Um, we do it very rapidly. Again, as I mentioned, that number, that 182% number, that's after 3 hours of visiting with that person. And quite frankly, I could probably do it faster than that. But that's there's a buildup of relationship and other pieces that go into it. But most definitely, there's my aspect. I'm working on this. I'm even trying to find a way because right now it's coaching.
Yep.
It's working individual with the coaching. I'm trying to use some of the tools, some of the technology to be able to actually put it into more of a self-paced program,
Yep.
self-taught, self-learned, because there's a lot of people out there, right, that want to do that. Well, hey, just tell me the symptoms. I mean, tell me the process. Don't teach it to me. Okay,
Yeah.
well, there's some people that will want to do that, and that's fine. There's different ways of learning for everybody. But I would say, one, just be willing and be prepared. Um, to quote one of the guys here, I mean, after I went through that 3 hours with me, his comment to me, and I have it written down, he says, you will not recognize me come December. And the other guy, he's actual international. He's down in Mexico. He told me, he says, I've learned more in 3 years here with you. I mean, sorry, 3 hours here with you than I have in 3 years with Vistage. And I mean, that's just, again, testimonials to the fact of something that works, something that is proven, something that gets results.
Ryan, thank you. This has been really, really good. And it's interesting. You started out talking about patterns, and what I'm hearing at the end is you're going to help people create new patterns that really make a difference.
Absolutely.
So thank you for being with us. And I hope people will reach out and be willing to spend that 3 hours just for 182%.
And right now, until I write my book, that 3 hours is for free.
Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. All Ryan's information is on the screen, and I hope you decide to, well, if you can't get to the book before it's published and be part of it, make sure you get it afterwards and reach out to Ryan.